Let me put my glasses on so I can talk to you clearly. Yo, this is your boy Gilly. Yo, this is Common Conversations, and this is our show about sex, right? Talk about sex. How we're gonna journey into this conversation is strictly about what we learned as children, right? If you have children, how do you talk to your kids? How did you introduce them to sexuality as well as sex? I've got my lovely wife. Well, how are we showing up today?
I'm a wife.
All right, she's a wife and a mother today, and we'll introduce her later as Teah, right? But we specifically how we talk to our daughter, how we engage our daughter. Dr. Ashley over here has two beautiful young boys, and she's gonna talk about how she talked to her two sons, how she's prepping them, hopefully to marry one of y'all daughters out there in the world. And
marry, not terrorize.
Marry, not terrorize. Real talk.
You better thank her.
But if you've watched the show, if you listen to it in the podcast spaces that you listen to podcasts, or if you watch it on any of the social media, you know that this conversation is about everything about health equity as it relates to sexual relations. And I change this narrative every time we do a new episode. I'm kind of excited about that. But as we're gonna journey through this, let's do our introductions. Shall we do that? And we're just gonna kick it off like we normally do it.
We normally do it. So what's up, y'all? I know you missed me. I wasn't here at the last one, but I'm back. Amira Bryant of The Amira Show here in Louisville, Kentucky. We focus on the empowerment of women, sex and sex work, the LGBT plus community, and we like to twerk something. And that's me.
Did you just say
You
twerk
like that
something?
We like to twerk something. Not something.
What's a twerk something?
Or sometimes
It's like, is that like half a cheek?
That's the whole cheek.
That's all the cheek.
That's all of
Every
it.
cheek.
Okay.
Twerk song, right.
So why you work? What
The
are you
Yang
talking
the
about?
Yang twins.
Twerk song.
I was about to say, we're gonna have to remove you from this couch.
That's a major control, half a cheek.
I mean, I've seen
already
some things in my life.
You just be a little humble, you know. I just like to twerk a little something. Like that's what it was.
I'm gonna let us introduce us, and I'm gonna introduce you to something I saw when I was in college. But go ahead, let's go.
I only have a little something, so I always. But anyway, my name is Riece. I am a PhD student at the University of Louisville in the public health program, and I am a pleasure researcher. Y'all ready for my fun
I'm
fact?
scared.
Let's go.
You scared of my fun fact? Don't be scared
She
of my
got
fun
on
fact.
orange today,
Okay.
so let's see.
Don't take my black card, but I have never seen the movie Brown Sugar.
Oh.
I won't take it.
See, I knew your face. Don't take my black card, but I ain't never seen it.
I won't shade you, shame you, whatever the
I'm
word
shaming.
That's my fun fact for today.
All right.
is. So now you have homework.
I have
Yes,
homework.
Team
And
America.
I need to watch Team America.
Yes, Team America. Yes, that is a classic.
Yeah.
Maybe not for black movies,
But
but definitely for cool households.
Got it.
I like
That's
that.
a
Cool
mess.
house.
I'm just saying. And we have Teah. Teah, would you like to introduce
Sure,
yourself?
sure.
Tell the audience who you are.
I'm Teah Williams-Hampton. I am a licensed clinical social worker and
Ooh,
thank you,
licensed.
and a mental health therapist in both Indiana and Kentucky. But for today's purposes, I am showing up as a mother of an adult young woman who is out in the world at Tennessee State University, you know, just exploring her life. So
Love that
that's
for
who
her
I'm showing
and
up as
y'all.
today.
Just telling the world what my baby is.
Well, she didn't say specifically.
I'm a protective
It's a lot of people's
father.
babies at Tennessee State
State.
University.
Okay, let's get it. Let's go. All right.
Somebody already went,
Right.
They're gonna be like, that's her.
That's all right. I taught her how to shoot. Don't play. She not a fighter, but she can kill. Let's go. So
Well, we skipped on.
no,
I
we
mean,
ain't going.
this is how he does me.
No, not
Like,
at all. She got
I get
Yeah, you really
He's
got to
like,
get
this
kicked out.
is-
Strike two.
Because
This
the
was
last
one.
episode when he tried to say, we got a doctor on the couch. So I ain't been here.
You ain't been in our
Yeah.
You don't
did.
even know me. Mm.
We need to publicly shame
Who
you.
you is.
trying to-
Tell the world who
Thank
you
you.
is.
Hi, y'all. I'm Dr. Ashley Anderson. It's so lovely to be here with these good people, minus him. And I'm a women's health nurse practitioner, and I feel like essentially all the things that I do in my life and most passionate about is empowering and uplifting women. So I'm happy to be here.
I'm working on my 35. I think I'm still stuck in childhood right now.
You
I'm
like
working-
12 right now.
I'm working on- yeah.
You got a lot of room to
I
grow.
got a lot of room to grow.
he stays in 12.
A lot of room to grow.
Now we got real.
So it's okay,
context
men,
today.
when you're in a room and you feel flustered, And it's still a safe space, but you know your ass is in trouble.
Oh, that's what you're describing right now?
You take your glasses off so you can focus.
Are you hot?
Oh, you don't.
I mean, yeah, if Tamika didn't do my makeup, I'd be sweating right now. Just throw that out there in the world, right? So let's start this conversation in a sense because, you know, we've been talking about consent, we've talked about pleasure, we've talked about all these different elements that we face in life, and we've had experts in the room, you know, but more importantly, talking about our kids in the sense of keeping them safe and empowering them to, one, understand their sexuality, understand their body and what is safe or not safe for them specifically. And then starts like we had Overstreet here and with Planned Parenthood, and she was talking about the different things and how they navigate the school system. I would love to hear more about, as parents, right, what we do to prepare our kids so that we're not always relying on outside sources to share things that may not fit our norms, right? And at the same time, we've had an opportunity to explore with each other what we learned as kids, right, which prepped us or did not prepare us for who we were going to become adults in this sex life, right, or in our sexual beings in that sense. And so thinking about that, I want to explore one question, and I'd love for all of us to jump in here. You know, we talked about it, I think, in the first episode, but just to repeat, you know, when were you first introduced to not sex, but sexuality?
When you say sexuality, do you mean sexual orientation or just overall general, this is something in the realm of sex?
I'm going to say overall, general, this is something in the realm of sex. Because as a kid, you didn't know what it was. It was just an introduction to a thing.
Yeah.
You know, like when maybe the idea is like, when did you realize you were a girl and it was different than a boy?
Oh, first grade.
First grade?
Yeah?
First grade, yeah, because he was cute and I liked him.
That's
So I mean, so we're gonna put gender, you know, in it, then there's that. But I'm like, well, how vulnerable or open are we supposed to be? And so Miguel and I was having a conversation about this, and the first thing that I went to was, well, there was a conversation that me and my father had about sex. But then I'm like, you have to roll it back. I tend to roll things back. And when was my first actual introduction to sex and feeling something sexual, but I didn't quite understand what that was? Yeah. And you know how you be over like people's houses, and I woke up in the middle of the night and then watching like porn.
Yeah.
Right? Boom. Right? And so you don't know, like, it's like, oh, and the body responds no matter what. Oh, so whether you 7, 8, 9, yes, right? And so I think I didn't have honest conversations, like really honest conversations, because I had to figure out why it was that I was even starting to have conversations with my dad about things. So my first introduction to that was I liked boys. I knew I liked boys in the first grade, but but I didn't feel anything. It was just like, oh, he's cute. But then, you know, inadvertently, and so this was not a grooming behavior, this was not anything like that, but I walked in on some stuff I wasn't supposed to walk in on. And it was like, oh, okay. Oh, so there's that.
That just added some shit to the plate.
Of course it did. I come serving meat.
That's what he said. That's interesting you bring up the walking in on the porn aspect. You unlocked a memory for me. I remember being at my dad's house, and Teah had a computer, and so I'm looking for the computer games in there and finding a porn CD and being like, oh my God, like knowing immediately as a kid, this is not something I'm supposed to be touching or knowing about. And I remember I said something to my mom. like
told
and so then my dad had a conversation with me about like, you know, I heard you found this and you talked to your mom, and I remember being so like embarrassed, like, oh, I don't want to like have this conversation, but it was like an introduction to having a conversation about sex with my dad that neither one of us were prepared for. Yep. I wasn't prepared to find the CD. He wasn't prepared to have his young daughter find the CD, but here we're thrust into this conversation.
What did you get out of that?
embarrassment. Mostly. I mostly feel like at the time I was like, I don't know, maybe 7, 8. Like I wasn't having the like emotional feelings like you were talking about. Like you see body parts and the body responds. I was more just like, this is scary, you know? And my dad is scary because he's a male that engages in this activity. Like I didn't have the idea of this is just things that humans do. Like to me, it was like, you know, I should be afraid because this male figure, authority figure, is into sex, and that means they might be into sex with me, and that's scary. Got you. Wow, that's an interesting take.
That is, yeah. I think I found CDs too, but I took them. Did I sneak and watch later? Like, big booty bitches.
Oh my God, why was it always the big booty? What was it about
Maybe
the big
they'll put an
booty
identifier in there. Black.
It was.
Like, you know, put an
Black
identifier
booty
in there.
jams or something. I'm like, what?
I can't remember if that, like, I was thinking on the question of when sexuality was introduced to me. I really feel like super early on because every time y'all say something, like, I'd be like, oh, I remember that, like the CDs. I remember that. I just don't know when. Yeah. I remember walking on my dad. He was bold. He was in the living room on the computer.
Not the living room.
He was like, I'm so sorry. It was awkward for both of us, but half me was like, I already know what's going on. I think so. I think if my timeline is correct. So I don't know. And I do remember the body feeling what it felt. I think when, I don't know, like some peers of mine was maybe talking to me in a sexual manner or something like that.
Yeah.
So that was confusing and weird. Cause like you can't control it and it's just happening. And then you wondering, well, does this mean I'm a woman now? Am I grown now? Girl, sit down somewhere. You don't even know what's happening. So I don't know. I was trying to think on like the very beginning of when that happened, but I feel like it happened early on and there was some sexual experience happening ever since then, at least yearly, monthly, or something like that. Either me exploring or being violated by other folks, or me just accidentally coming upon stuff like walking on my dad, my parents, hearing them, and we weren't allowed to have headphones or nothing.
Yeah.
Like going to bed, we just go to bed. Like you ain't got to be doing. Yeah.
Hearing your parents have sex.
So maybe that was it. Because then one day I went to finally like look. And I was like, oh my God, why did I do that?
So you're just naturally curious.
I guess so.
Yeah, you hear a noise, you run, and be like, what is that?
I run to it.
Yeah. And be like, oh.
No, thank you.
Okay. That's the thing. I got to learn that now. What is that? What did just happen?
Exactly.
It's a process.
And you can't talk to them about it, one, because I'm going to get in trouble. Like, what the hell was you doing up? And at our door, it's like, you got a lot to explain. You can't just say, I was curious to know what y'all was doing. You can't just say that. Or at least I couldn't, because it was an ass whooping.
Right.
Gotcha.
Or stay in your lane, mind your business type deal. So
Or stay in a child's place.
Stay in a child's place. And it's just kind of like, but you right here.
You put me in Grown Funk's business.
You put me here. I didn't ask for this.
I can hear your business.
Something to chew on is we had this conversation, right? When parents put their kids in adult situations, but they're not prepared to have adult conversations with their children, right? Yes. You know, so we'll introduce you to something, but we're not going to carry you through it so that you understand what it is.
Because then we go figure it out ourselves.
Yes.
So then we're going to do our own research, all the LimeWire porn I could get, any other CDs I came across, talking to my friends, like, you know, so I'm doing my best here to maneuver and figure it out. And my mom was most open to talking to me about the stuff. But at a younger age, again, like I said in prior episodes, she was mostly focused on the result of having sex, which just always was, you're gonna get pregnant.
Gotcha. So Doc, when did you get introduced to sexuality, sensuality, all those things?
I feel like it was late. I mean, kind of like what Teah was saying, I remember in kindergarten, there was like this little boy that I was like, oh, he's cute, I think I like him. Like, but that was pretty much it. I thank God never walked in on my parents doing anything.
Blessings.
My God, that's traumatic. The thought is traumatic. But I mean, I would say it had to be old, like when I was maybe even in high school.
Yeah.
Because like I mentioned on another episode, I was like the youngest. I was 13 when I entered high school. So I was very behind on doing a lot of things. And even just listening to some of my peers who have been sexually active and were like, it hurt. I'm like, yeah, not interested in that.
I'm interested in pain.
That doesn't sound fun, especially in that part. Like, no thanks. So I would have to say around high school sometime, but I don't really have like a specific memory or moment where I was just like, this is that.
That's that moment. That's that moment. All right. Yeah.
I just have a thought. Yeah.
Go.
Well, you can go. Go ahead.
Mine? Man, since the day I was born. So sensuality, wow, second grade. I knew I loved women. I knew I loved girls. I knew I loved body parts. But then there was Miss Cookie next door.
Miss Cookie next
Miss Cookie,
door.
like Miss Parker.
That's literally what.
And body shape,
got one.
face, and then the first time I gave her a hug and she face planted me right in her breast, I was like, yeah, I love women.
She face planted you right in her breast, or
This
you
story is
face
so
planted you
common.
right in her breast?
She said, "Come here,
I don't know.
Because
but
we trying to
but
find
here's
out
the
if Miss
reality.
Cookie was a predator.
Well, you know what? She was definitely, I was infatuated as a very young kid who didn't know what I was infatuated with. But we also talked about in a few previous episodes, prior to that, I had already read the Kama Sutra book, right? Before I was in first or second grade, right? So I had also experienced I had sexual experiences from adults telling me, that I had a long tongue and so I would make a woman happy, right? So these things were already implanted in my head.
They're sexualized.
And so my body was already thinking like, ooh, what can I do? Or what is this for? And as I journey, unfortunately for me, it's way before high school, right? So as my journey begins all through adolescence. So the conversation was never about healthy sex. But the conversation about sex was always in the room, right? Even my Uncle Johnny, who's not my uncle, but my father's best friend, who's a cross-dresser and did drag, right? So even being in that room, like we get introduced to what then was just a gay relationship, or was it a gay relationship? So my brother denied, now that my dad is dead, he can't confine or deny. We used to be like, I think dad's gay, but maybe not. Because his best friend was gay and he was but he homosexually was, from a standpoint of talking about being homosexual, was very abusive, right? So I was a fag by the time I was in third grade because of just my mannerisms, right? So he would go through that journey. So being sexualized or being introduced to that was always, and it wasn't until my peer influence developed in around about high school that I was actually introduced to actual sex, right? But then it was, why are you still a virgin? Why you still a virgin? Why you still a virgin? You should be smashing, or you shouldn't be smashing, or you know. So that conversation happens.
It feels so violent.
But yeah,
You should be smashing, like,
What's that?
Mash a pumpkin.
so
It is violent.
Mashed
That does not
potatoes,
sound like a
right.
pleasurable experience.
it doesn't. It
Travis
doesn't.
Porter run into that pussy like a crash dummy.
You know, so
Pain.
yeah, no, not at all.
No
So yeah,
thanks.
my journey is, I think, maybe it's common to everybody else, but unique to me in that sense. So sensual, being sensual and being sexual has always been there, right? So thought.
Well, that was, Miguel's talked about this stuff a lot, and this conversation has evolved because before it was, this used to happen, and that used to happen, and that used to happen. I'm like, you were really exposed to sex really early, like on a consistent basis, and he hadn't seen it really as a violation. It was so normal. It was so incredibly normal. But then, when I compared our experiences, so how did we start off here? So my first sex talk was with my father. Not my mother. My mother didn't even tell me about my period. Nothing. It was nothing in my
She just
body.
waited till you got it?
No, I don't know if I ever told her. When I did come out, I told my father.
Got you.
I told my father because my father had a friend, had a 17-year-old daughter, and she had gotten pregnant, and he was mortified. His dream for us was that we would graduate high school, go off to school, and he had a very interesting life, so he wanted definitely a dream here. And so he sat me down, and he said, Teah, Mick, I need to tell you about sex. And he started off like this. Boys have urges.
Just boys.
Because he's a boy. My daddy was, but he was also very respectful of me. My father had always created space for us to communicate. He had always created just a respectful space, and he was so nervous about this. And so he said, boys have urges, and these are the kinds of things that boys may do to try and get you to have sex with them. And, I don't want you to get pregnant. I don't want you to get diseases. So it was like, this could happen. It was kind of rudimentary because he's not inside of a girl's body. So, he does, and I'll talk about Suge later. One of the things that I came up with, Suge was like, woo, girl, your body will betray you.
The flesh is weird.
Yeah, my daddy didn't tell me my body would betray me off of a kiss. You know what I'm saying, right? Right. But as he just kind of unfolded that, like, we continued to just have conversations. So by the time I was in middle school, 7th grade, most of my friends were sexually active, not me. But I knew by the time I hit high school, I remember being on the bus, and I don't know why am I thinking about this on the bus. I was like, I'm a freshman. This is the year I'm gonna lose my virginity.
Okay, let's go.
Why did I think that? Right? But all of my friends have been talking about this, and it wasn't about pain. It wasn't about anything. It was like, I got my boyfriend, we did it, and da-da-da. And I'm like, and where's your boyfriend? I live in Indiana. Her boyfriend's in Louisville, so she got a cool dude in Louisville.
Okay.
And so, right, so this is being in that moment at the time. So I knew hitting high school, so I lost my virginity when I was 15. And it was cool. He hadn't slept with anybody. I hadn't slept with anybody. And I do need to say this. I think the fact that I had a very, very respectful, present dad allowed me, one, to give myself permission to say yes or no. And what it also allowed me to do was, I'm a feel person. If something don't feel right, and so if you don't have the experience of having somebody treat you well, you kind of you may not have that idea of.
You don't have a basis.
Right, you don't have a basis. Like, this don't feel right, because it don't feel like that.
Right.
But I didn't know that would be useful actually until later, when I had experiences like, I'm about to walk into some mess. I'm about to walk into some mess, so I need to make a decision. But I know I kind of took that somewhere. But
let's go. I think these are things that people need to hear, and I think as we share our experiences, those who are watching or listening may have a moment, be like, aha, you know what I mean? Maybe this is why I think the way I think, and the way I process the way I process. But at the same time, this also leads to like discussion of, why I raised, or why I thought I was raising my daughter, or sharing with my daughter what I felt was going to be a protective space for her and a knowledge space for her. And it's a challenge when you have a 2-parent household, because we have to come together to introduce a thing. And then if you don't know your backgrounds, then that can also become conflicts, right? And so, I'm introduced to rape and child molestation early in life. So the only thing I can think about in the beginning of my kid coming into this world is protect. So how do I teach her to protect herself? How do I protect her? And so in that process, it begins with, well, she's a girl. Girls have a vagina, boys have a penis. Let's work through that process, right? Early, right? And then, Teah is good at doing what Teah does in that sense. I even remember, so Suge might be maybe 2. Nah, she was pre-potty training. So whatever this phase where we were getting to do potty training, and she always used to walk in on me when I was using the bathroom. And at first I was like, oh, this is bad. You shouldn't see me pee. And it was Miss Darlene, and our caretaker, whatever you call Miss Darlene, like our other mother, our whatever. She was like, Gail, it's okay. Let her come into the bathroom and see you pee. And I was like, isn't that weird? She's like, nah, boys have a penis. I was like, yeah, we went through that journey. It's okay, right? There's nothing related to sex in this space, right? We're talking about, gender, our gender positions. Okay. So, and then all of a sudden it came on, she said, hey, if you want a potty trainer, why don't you start sitting down and peeing? So she can see what you do, because she's gonna mimic that. Now later on in life, she tells me, she said, yeah, Daddy, I remember the first time I tried to stand up and pee. And then she was like, yeah, girls can't do that.
Yeah, didn't we all try that?
I did.
Yeah.
I didn't until I was grown. And I made it work.
You have to like squat over the toilet.
No,
right
you
between your legs.
just pull your clit up. You just treat it like a dick and aim.
Man, that's
I've
again,
never heard that before in my
curiosity,
life.
right?
Yes.
And I love the fact that you will absolutely go down the journey.
Listen, sometimes you just be in predicaments like, okay, what if I try it like this?
Yeah. So I think about that, and you know, so I'd even be curious to hear how y'all approach it. Definitely the two mothers sitting here, because you have two boys, and you having an adult, daughter, woman. You know, what was the purpose and when that step that you realized, like, I need to teach my kid both about their sexuality, and then also, you know, like Suge and I we talk about sex around about, but not directly. And I remember, and I'll preface this and then I'll drop it. I remember sitting in a room with us, and I've said this before, where I've always made the assumption that women talk to their daughters about sex. And, you know, the more we keep talking to women, the more I keep talking to women, and I keep talking about sex, I am realizing that mothers can do a very horrible job about preparing their daughters, you know, for this life. And I wonder too, right? This is a double-edged thing, because if we're not preparing our daughters, what are we doing to our sons? And I grew up in a single parent household for the most part. And I can tell you my fathers, all of them were really horrible in prepping me for how to deal with a woman. So I'll put that there and think about, you know, what did you do different with Suge? And what are you planning to do with your boys? And then y'all can chime in too.
What was done with us?
Right. I'm not planning on having those conversations.
You go, boom, boom, boom.
That's a whole nother thing, though. It's another episode.
Well, I mean, the first thing that I did differently was be a mom that talked to my daughter, you know, about sex. Again, when I started having sex, first person I told was actually my brother, who then went and told my mother. And then it was this race around the house. It was this race around the house because my brother was afraid I was going to meet some dog-ass dude and get pregnant. So he tells my mother, who had never talked to me about sex, I'm racing through the house to go tell my dad. I was like, Daddy, I need to tell you something. And I told him, and he just said, wow. And so what I wanted to do was be a mother who actually talked to my daughter about sex. And I had to check with Suge last night. I said, how did we actually go about it? Because when you're having a real conversation, you know, this is real, because it's like, did you sit down and do this? And she said, before I started having sex or after. And she said it came in spurts. Okay. It came in spurts. So let me back up. I feel like I always have to back this up. When she was about 8 or 9 years old, I was in a class, and it had a list of things that parents do to their children to actually cause them to feel like they can't be themselves. And I saw like 8 or 9 things on this list that I was doing, trying to be a good parent, all these don't messages, trying to be a good parent. And I come home and I talk to her and I said, Suge, do I do this, and this? And kids are really great. And she said, yes, Mom, you do that sometimes. And so we kind of went into how it made her feel. We created something called honesty moments. And I put it in the box. I said, you can say whatever it is you want to say. She's like, whatever? I said, yeah. And she said, I'm sorry, Heather's a bitch. I said, okay. Heather's a bitch.
I hope you felt that.
Okay. Heather's a bitch. You're 8 years old. Okay. All right. But just in that moment, because I'm like, we're gonna close up the box. You can't be going around the house calling people bitches. Because that is a value in our house, you know, right? But if you want that honesty moment, you know, let's do that. And what that did is that it helped her to feel that she could come to me with anything, even if she's uncomfortable with it. It's still it's not. It doesn't always feel comfortable, but you can make it safe. Right? So safe means I am not going to reject or shame you. I am not going to reject or shame you. So when she started liking this little boy, so we started off with, so did you kiss him? This was me. Did you kiss him? She's like, yeah, Mom, I did. And so we kind of went into what that experience was like, and things like that. So it just kind of came in spurts in terms of like different levels of stuff. How did you feel? And that's kind of when that whole, okay, if it felt good, I get that. It's like, but Suge, your body will betray you sometimes. So I need you to think. And so we do talk about things like, consent, and also there was just so many lessons. So I'm sorry, I'm just gonna go back and forth because I don't want to like go ahead of things. So
we're gonna have to wrap up here in a little while, but we might run a little longer just for this conversation. So go ahead, share.
And there was also things like, because I was trying to preempt things. So in my head, I was thinking I was 15 when I had sex. So I'm waiting for her to come to me and say, Mom, I'm doing it.
I'm doing it.
I'm doing it. And so I'm teaching her things like, so I was a part of a group called Young Life here. It was a church group. And it was actually the coolest sex talk that I'd ever had, like from a church group. And so the guy said, you know what, look, he said, let's talk about sex. And he said, people just think it's all about your body. But he said, really, it's about like two spirits, two energies actually becoming one. And he said, so sometimes if you're having a lot of sex, that's cool, you can enjoy that. But he said, sometimes it can feel very empty at the end. Right? So it's not just a body thing. Yeah. He said it's a spirit thing. He's like, so you just think you're having sex, with 10, 12 people and it feels good and it felt good, but then later you feel empty. You all emptied out because you got pieces of yourself. Yeah. And then you've also taken on somebody else's energy too. So he's saying just be mindful that it's not just a body thing. So these were things that I was talking about to her, which she did not get it. Of course, because she's not having sex at the time. But I'm trying to cram this stuff in because I'm like, tomorrow she's going to come and say that, her and Josh got it in, and I'm like, but that did not happen until later, and I'm glad that she had that reference, because a lot of times it's like they got to get into that experience before they get the lesson. So it's like I'm giving the lesson and they don't get it. She don't get it, but once she got into the experience, the lesson made sense.
It makes a lot of, and Doc, I want to hear from you if you don't mind, but it makes a lot of sense, I think, for a lot of people, pre-education, right? When you give somebody information, a lot of times they don't know what they do with it until they get into a situation, right? And so when we don't educate, even for us, like if we're not educating our children, right, we're not prepping them for what's coming. And Doc, I want to hear from you, then I'll share a story as well. Go. What are you thinking, boys? Because you got young boys, right?
Real young, so I'm over here taking notes.
Okay.
Did you write down honesty moment?
I sure did. Living with 2 stars. Okay.
I needed some of those honesty moments when I was growing up.
Right.
I guess I could say, I've said before that right now, it's important for me to create a space where they feel comfortable talking to me and asking questions. Like I mentioned, my oldest has clearly found his penis and likes to touch it. And we, just create boundaries around where it's appropriate to do that. And then who's allowed to touch and see it and who's not. But I think I can speak on my desire for as they get older, because being a clinician in a space where moms bring their daughters to talk about sex and birth control and those kinds of things, I want to be that mom. Like, I want to be the mom that they trust to be in that space and have like intimate conversations with them so that they feel prepared when their body betrays them. Or because little girls are choosing early these days.
Yes.
I'm not here for none of it.
Yes.
But I want them to, have sex when they feel ready.
Right.
Not when they feel pressured because their peers are doing it or because they don't want someone to tell them like, well, why ain't you done this, that, and the other? I want them to be cognizant of the importance of sex and how it, can intertwine spirits and energies and all of those things, and let them make the decision who they feel is worthy of that, and make sure that they understand that, it's a gift. You're giving a piece of you to someone, make sure that she deserves that. So you know, my dream is for my son to be like, nah, mama, she's not poised enough, or she's not. That's why they gotta be around these pageant girls.
Yes.
They gotta know how to pick.
Yes.
All a setup. All of it.
You're not realizing every step.
So you remember that time, Atlas, when you were sitting at the pageant, and I was like, see, look, baby steps, no, but truly, but for real.
Honesty moment.
Honesty moments.
Yeah.
I really want them to feel like they can talk to me about all of the things. So nothing is off limits.
Gotcha.
They feel comfortable and confident, know that they have support.
All right. I wonder about other dads, because I know these are the spots where sometimes I got it wrong, because you know, I do things subliminally, right? And I don't always explain the reason why I'm doing a thing. And so I don't think my daughter always understood at the time why I was what I was or what I was doing.
That's usually how it goes.
And so, but I learned later, now that she's 19 years old, like some of the lessons were like, oh shit, okay, Dad, now I get it. And I understand that part, right? Like when I was young, I didn't. So I think sometimes for parents, like if it's just an advice, you know, clarity is super important. But, you know, coming from a space of trauma and understanding that, you know, I had kids in my family when we were kids who were getting raped and molested, you know, that's my sex experience, right? Before ever having sex, and then thinking about my kid, like, man, I gotta protect you from all the predators,
All of this stuff.
right?
Dusty.
And how do
out
you
there.
do that without really disclosing real information or real stories? Like, why do I not let you see your uncle? Why do we don't go to grandma's house? Or why we don't do things like this when certain people are in the room? I'm not telling them why, because I'm thinking, you know, she's not old enough or she can't quite figure that part out. But at some point, we did get to that point where I was disclosing. But it took a while, you know. So what I did create were these little subtle rules that probably could have been better explained later, but we don't know what we're doing when we're doing it. Right. But I used to tell Suge when she was little, no matter where you go, you can always come home, right? So when the moment comes, you're uncomfortable, you call Dad no matter what, right? And so even in this life, I say the same thing at 19, like you're somewhere and you no longer want to be there and you can't leave, you come get Dad. I'm not gonna ask questions. I'm just gonna get you. Now, if somebody hurt you, just understand who your dad is later. So that's the thing you don't want to do, fathers, too. Like, don't teach your kids violence. Like, you can be a violent person because that creates a distrust in them as well. Like, they want you to save them. They may not want you to hurt who hurt them, right? Because that hurt you, and because they're not rationalizing the hurt, right? It might just be a broken heart. It might just be bad words,
And that's
right?
just added trauma.
Yeah, so it's important how you navigate this in the space of sensuality, sex, and these things. But these are lessons I had to learn as we journey with her.
Can we explore a little bit, like, I know we've talked a lot about daughters too, but can we kind of talk about like dads and sons? Because I have heard on multiple occasions just some trash that dads are telling their kids about, like, oh, go have sex with as many girls as you want to while you're young, and like you don't have to settle down or whatever. And I feel like that's trash, because you're also, not only you're potentially traumatizing this child, because now he's out here putting himself at risk, potentially having children with all sorts of random people, and but then what is that doing to women? Like these girls will grow up to be women who have been traumatized by this little boy that you gave permission to act a fool. So like I think we just need to do better.
We do, but I come from a traumatized male experience. So I couldn't even talk to men until I was probably 30, right? So, you know, all my fathers did. My mother was married 4 times, so I basically have 3 fathers who raised me, right? So if I go down that journey, you know, my father, who was, I would say, physically and mentally abusive and sexually inappropriate, right? But he would say things like that, like, you know, it's a conquest, knock it out, you know, do your thing, go get your girl, it's okay to kiss, are you fucking yet? Like, these are real things, right? But I think for him, it was mostly because he called me a fag most of my life, right? So he wanted to make sure his son wasn't gay, right? So it was this exploration with women, and if you did that, but I think he was really, as an adult, I think he was talking about himself, right? But we don't notice as kids, right? Most of the time, our parents are mirroring their fears, or who they are,
real.
right? My stepfather, you know, who I want to say right now is a good dude, but was not at that time, better relationship today than it was then. But also kind of in that journey, not as explicit, but he was super abusive toward my mother, both physically, sexual assault, you know, et cetera. You know, it is what it is. So I learned that journey from him, right? But God bless my mom, because I learned her journey and was like, yo, we need to respect women. You shouldn't. And so I become basically a superhero to my mother, right? So I'm fighting the opposition in that relationship for both my fathers and trying to protect my mom. Even as a kid, not knowing what that is, right? I just know it's harmful. But again, they both put me on a journey to disrespect women and mostly hate myself, right? Because that's also what's being reflected through that space. It wasn't until really my third father, my stepdad, who was really cool, interesting piece, we learned later, like he also kind of imprinted on me to respect women. He also imprinted on me to respect the LGBT community, not understanding why at some point. This story, I remember I was in 6th grade, and maybe sixth or 7th grade, and I was sitting on the bed. He made me mad, and I called him a fag. And he got mad at me, and this is the first time he ever grounded me, right? And I was like, the fuck you mad about? It's just a word. We do later find out he's gay. But what was more interesting is that I didn't understand what a fag was, because I've never even called it, right? I just know it just makes you mad, right?
Yeah.
But we later have this other conversation and just engagement through, he took time to start to educate me, right? So again, negative responses and the shit that men do to little boys. So when we were having a conversation about consent and somebody said, well, you should be able to learn consent from a man. And I was like, should you? Shit, not the men I know. You don't want your boys learning, you don't want your girls learning what consent is from the men I know, right? So I learned consent from the women. And even some of that, as we journey through that, I learned that some of the women who were teaching me consent was a little off too, right? So, but I can only speak to my experience, and I hope that listeners are listening or they're watching, and we sit back and think about what we do as adults to children, in front of children, even if it's unintentional. There's lessons to be learned, because I think sometimes people are predators, and then sometimes people do things and they don't know what they're doing, but it changes the person that you're doing it to. So I don't know if that's kind of what you wanted to hear, but
I'd like to y'all have any thoughts. Yeah.
I kind of have a curiosity question of just for you all as parents, and I know, Amira, you mentioned that you want to have kids eventually. Do you or did you or consider talking to the parents of the people that your daughter or your sons will be dating, like their parents, about the conversations that they're having with their kid? Is that something that you all ever considered or talked about, or? I didn't, and primarily because Suge didn't really have like a whole lot of relationships. When she got her first heartbreak in 8th grade, she's a lot like me. I'm like, look, I don't like how that feels, so I'm not going to like do that a whole lot. So I don't really think that we had a lot of opportunity to do that. But even still, I don't know that I would have thought to even have a conversation like that with another parent. So that's, I mean, we only got one, so we don't have another one to try. Is that something you think you would consider doing? Because I just hear you all talk a lot about like the parents really play a role in this, and you even mentioned, the parents, the way that the parent talks to the kid influences how the kid is gonna go out into the world and experience. So if you put a lot of self-worth into your daughter, then you teach them that they're getting it from home, so they don't have to seek it out in other places. And the same thing with like a son. If you put a lot into them around consent, then the women that they engage with are gonna have positive experiences versus the negative experience that you mentioned. So I just wonder what it would have been like if, my first love, like when I had this boyfriend in high school, if our parents would have got together and had a conversation, well, this is what I'm talking to my daughter about, and what are you telling your son? Because eventually they're gonna get together, and we need to make sure we're on the same page as parents, that we're giving them the same information.
That would almost be a complete and total culture shift.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, damn, that's a lot of work. Like, that's gonna take
It's probably way
community.
better than what I was thinking.
What are you thinking?
I was thinking like, oh, when you think you like somebody, bring her over to Athena so she could get tested. We can talk about birth control, and I can control this piece. Like, don't, she got a depo shot today, don't touch her for 7 days. Like, this is where we are in my house. So it would probably be better for me to just contact her mom. I'm gonna make note about that too.
All of our parents can control that birth control shot. We don't have OBGYN moms.
Listen, tell her to meet me in the bathroom, okay?
Another thing that you kind of bring up being a doctor is, and the birth control, especially when you're raising sons. As a sex educator, I always like to talk to young men about what birth control looks like.
Yeah.
And that you can actually tell, you don't have to trust someone's word when they say I'm on birth control and you feel like you're going to get trapped. Like, you don't have to trust that. You can look for it. Do you know how to find the strings in an IUD?
Yep.
Do you know that the NuvaRing is supposed to stay in and what it feels like? Can you feel for an implant? Like, these are things that you, having that knowledge as an OBGYN, get to equip your sons with.
That is pretty dope. Don't let her put no okie doke. She said she got this. She's on her arm.
Right,
She said she got this. Look for the little string.
Oh,
Check
right
the pill
here.
pack.
Exactly.
If today is Friday and she got Monday
Make
pill
sure
in
it
there,
match.
don't do it.
Make sure the pills match.
Yeah.
Real
So
talk.
that's cool.
Well, I don't know where you're going with this. I don't know how long we're supposed to go, but
We gotta wrap up.
right.
There's a cue right there.
Okay, cue, wrap up.
Why are y'all doing
Shout
the
out
most?
to the crew.
The next segment is going to be about, if it's all that scary, why are people doing it? And I think that was an important point that I made, is that sex can be enjoyable. You also have to be responsible, for yourself and value your body and value who you are before you just casually give it out. It's fine if you want to casually do it, but understand that there are consequences to it as well. So there are benefits and there are consequences to it. So.
As we wrap and we walk out of here.
I'm
No,
not gonna ask no
I'm
more
gonna
questions.
go to you. Ask this last question.
Because it's about to go a
and
whole
let's do a 30-second rotation. So ask the question, 30 seconds to answer.
seconds.
Everybody get 30 seconds to answer, and then we're gonna walk out of here.
Okay.
So my question, because what you mentioned about just like giving freely, did you all ever talk to Suge about the double standard in that sense? Like, in the sense of when boys are sexually promiscuous, they are kind of seen as
encouraged.
kind of a hero. It's definitely encouraged. For girls doing it, then you're a hoe. Like, did you all have that conversation with her?
I did not intentionally, because I don't think that way, right?
Yeah.
But I'm more of a protective person. So my thing is, Suge, if you're gonna wear or use your body in this way, make sure that you're doing it for you and understand what's coming, what the intention is coming. So I really, and maybe I should have, but I never really looked at it, because I see sex as sex. If you are promiscuous, a hoe for me is a whore. You're a sex worker, right? So don't get me wrong, I grew up calling women hoes, because who didn't? And we learn and correct ourselves, right? Who didn't? But the reality for me, like, if I call somebody a hoe, you probably doing the most and should be paid for what you're doing, right?
Dang.
But I mean, that's just how I think, right? But you're a professional.
Paying profession in Greece.
You're a
back in the
professional.
day,
There it is.
you
Do what
know.
you do. So I don't really see it like that. I just see, if you're promiscuous, period, male, female, right? It's a thing. You need to protect yourself. But I'm also the person who said I didn't have a whole lot of sex partners. And I believe sex is about having a third conversation that most people don't prepare themselves for, right? It's us engaging at a whole trajectory. What is that word?
Trajectory?
Yeah, there we go.
Trajectical.
That's like
Yeah.
trajectory and testicle.
At the same
Yeah.
time. Right. We're going to run them both.
He's
I
a
like that.
word
Toss them in there.
splicer.
Let's get it. But
wanna
I
write
just think
that
it's a
down
higher
on
level
the spot.
conversation. That's my 30
Man,
seconds.
that was 48.5
Right, that was like 2
seconds.
hours.
What was the question?
I don't know.
Just, did y'all talk about the
About the double standard, I don't know that I did a great job with it, but I did talk about the double standard. That, if you sleep with a lot of people, that they're going to see you, because you're a female, as loose, hoe, whatever it is. And that dudes don't get that same thing. So I'm like, if you do what you're gonna do, protect yourself, but understand that this is still where we are in the culture. So it was that, and trying to do that in a way that wasn't shaming was very hard because my mother did that. You know, you don't talk about other people being a whore, you a whore. You know, it's like, I just did it like one time. You know? So yes, I don't know if it was done in a way that was very well done, but it's like, this is a possibility here. And by the way, he was really like one of the best, safest dudes on campus. Like, I was in his room for 3 weeks and he never touched me. And I mean, it was just straight conversation.
Okay.
So like, when the way Miguel comes off like here, they're gonna be like, how you get married and stay married? He was probably one of the most respectful and safe people. So he not only kept his mom safe, he was known to be one of the safest dudes. Girls get drunk and pass out in his room and know that nobody's gonna be on top of them when they wake up. Like, so it's legit. It's very legit.
That's dope. And it sucks that we have to give men props for doing that.
Yeah, right.
To me, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Right.
Leave
Yeah.
me alone. What?
That's
Right.
Yeah, that's dope. You wanna go first?
Well, go ahead.
So I was just gonna wrap with saying, like, shout out to moms and dad. You know, he did what he could. They both did what they could. But like, you know, I look forward to the future when sexuality and conversations around it is neutral and we're not speaking or talking to our kids already like sexualizing them and putting our fears into them about, you know, the stages in the journey of becoming a more sexual human being. I mean, like, Miguel, you said it, like, since the jump, like, since I was born, I'm just like, yeah, like, sex is how we got here. Like, I don't want to say, like, the world revolves around sex to an extent, but when are we going to get and move closer to just having neutral conversations? I remember, like, I was flexing my leg, trying to show my dad, like, Dad, touch is, like, solid. Yeah, love my legs. He was like, ew, no. Like, I don't want to touch you. I'm like, you just sexualized this whole experience. It did not have to even be like that. But, you know, as an adult, I talk to my mom even more than I did before. Like, I'll be like, Mom, like, I did this and he slipped in my ass and like, I don't know, things are weird. And she's like, well, back when I did that. I'm like, what? What you mean back when you did that? You could have prevented this whole situation. So I just look forward to when we move into that space and into that comfort. And y'all give me hope. Y'all give me hope.
Let's get it.
That's gay.
Let's get it.
Happy Pride.
All right. I mean, approaching it from a pleasure standpoint, obviously I believe that everyone deserves the right to feel pleasure. And I look forward to a world where we don't have a double standard. I do recognize that there's the consequences for women who understand that they deserve pleasure too, and in whatever way that looks like. Whether I like to have multiple partners or I like to have one partner. I look forward to a world where everyone can accept themselves for where they are in their journey and that the labels kind of disappear.
Yeah. And we just people.
Let's go. I appreciate it. This has been awesome. I hope those who are listening, you learned something. Want to learn more, send us a comment, send us a message. You can contact any of us through our social media. We might throw it up on the screen. Somebody might answer, somebody might not. But hear more so.
Sliding in my DMs.
Slide in my
Don't be